We are talking today about AI coding for velocity-obsessed developers, coding in parallel. I am Mike Biglan, CEO at DevSwarm and 20 Ideas, and we have Trevor here.
Hi. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
CTO of DevSwarm and 20 Ideas.
And specifically, yeah, two different companies. 20 Ideas really focuses on building complex but easy to use products. We've been doing it for a long time. We've been doing a lot of development and coding. So, our whole team has been doing that for a long time. And so one of the things that came up about 6 months ago is we've been embracing AI coding and the speed and the potential of it is how to do it as good as possible. What are the tools out there? And what we found is there is a lot of tools that are sort of the old way that kind of have AI just plugged in as feels like an afterthought, and that there's a better way to do it. Hence, we created DevSwarm. We launched a few days ago on Monday. It's out in the world. It's free to download. And so we're going to talk in general about high velocity engineering today, about how to move faster with good production grade practices and code, how we use it with DevSwarm. We'll show off what you can do with DevSwarm. A lot of what we show off can be our general principles and other things, so you can kind of get an idea for the things we're doing. In this room, as Mary mentioned, there are going to be people who are solo developers, looking for the best tools. There are people that lead teams, as some of us have done, of developers and want to figure out what are the best practices for them. There's founders who want to really get products built with confidence, like execute with confidence, especially with all these new capabilities. Leveraging AI coding is the future. The only question is really what are the tools and processes to use, because there are a lot of mediocre ones out there that might be better than sort of what was there 5 years ago, but at the same time there are oftentimes better ways. Examples: 30% of Microsoft code is written by AI. It's probably even more since this quote. 50% code with Google. There's a tool overload. There continues to be so many choices, how to sort of break through that noise. Of the categories, we have vibe coding. You hear a lot about vibe coding, which is just this giant umbrella, overloaded umbrella term. You have IDE assistants, which have been around for 30 years with like Cursor and Windsurf that have essentially AI plugged into them. The same they've been for a lot of years with that AI. There are these new CLI agents, and then there's new tools like DevSwarm, which is all about Hive coding. At the end of the day, what are you trying to solve? What tool do you use? Vibe coding, sort of the traditional sense, is really good for quick prototypes where you don't really care about the code. You're just throwing something together. That's a wonderful use case for it. The CLI coding assistants, there's Claude Code, there's Amazon Q, there's Gemini, there's Codex. The best one continues to change. Claude Code has been the best in my mind for some months. Codex is making a run for it. You see a lot of people commenting on Reddit that they are making a switch to Codex. The CLI assistants, what are they missing? They're missing that parallel from the foundation, the clear, easy interface, like IDE-like features, diffs, exploring, editing. They're not optimized for developer experience from the foundation, and just the ease of switching from them. So you have IDEs coding 1.0. You have the AI enhanced editors like Cursor and Windsurf. Then you have these CLI assistants, like these single AI coder interfaces. And really what we're talking about today is the high velocity engineering, and about DevSwarm is all about coding 4.0. It's that next thing where you're really orchestrating multiple of them. There are very few things exist that are aimed at that. So Hive coding is the high velocity engineering. Vibe coding, as I mentioned, it's the catch-all term for any AI coding. That's not how it started, but that's kind of how it's come up. But there's two different concepts. Vibe coding is for prototypes, ignoring the code, and Hive coding is for production grade code that matters. And why this distinction is important, because you see it used and people are vibe coding, and you don't really know what you're getting. Some people say, like with Claude Code, they're doing production grade code. They're really doing Hive coding. And if you don't know, if people kind of treat it the same thing, you miss this really important nuance to it, which is you don't want your production grade website done by V0 or Lovable. Like that's not where you're wanting to go with it. So best way to understand this is really to see it in action. So I'm going to hand it over to Trevor, who's going to just show how it works.
So where we're going to start is we're going to start right after you've downloaded and logged in DevSwarm. So the first thing that you'll see is you'll see this screen, the system check that makes sure that you have everything that you need to get started. So over here, we have this option of different agents. And so these are all command line AI assistants, and these things are extremely powerful. They can do comprehensive refactors of complex code bases. And with enough engineering experience and stuff, you're there to make sure that they don't misunderstand something. So what we're going to start with, I'm going to install two today. I'm going to install Claude Code and Gemini. Um, Usually I just do Claude Code, but Claude Code's been having a little bit of trouble today, it looks like, when I look at their status page. So we're going to grab Gemini too, just in case. All right, there we go. So the first thing that we'll do is we're going to add a repository. So this is a Git repository like we all know and love. I'm going to add an existing one. I'm going to add one of my games I've been working on. So we'll get starting. Let's get started building. So when we build, what that means to us, we have these builders, and a builder is a combination of a Git branch and an AI. And so I'm going to add fire damage to my game right now. And I'm going to choose Gemini here. And so let's get this going. Up here, we can see that we've got our various tools that we use for editing, but the primary one we'll focus on for now is the build mode, which is interacting with the AI directly. We'll go over the other tools shortly. There's some other configuration that we have the repository that makes it so it's easy to run each of your different builders in parallel when your app is running. You initially don't really need to get that set up right away because you can iterate with your AI safely, and I'll show you why that is here shortly. But here's this branch. So this is my repository, a Git repository, and I've made a branch. I want to add another one here real quick just to get rolling here. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's add the invincibility system down here. Let's add that with Gemini as well. And then we'll go ahead and add, I think, use string pulling pathfinding. And we're going to give Claude a chance here. All right. So what I've done here, nope. Guess we're not giving Claude a chance there. All right. So we can archive our builders. That makes it so that you can clean things up in case you're not sure what's, in case you want to focus on certain ones here. So we'll just stick with Gemini for now. All right, so let's get started. I've got some prompts set aside here that I'll put in here. And so the key part here with DevSwarm is that right now, this is the norm really for a lot of folks, is you put your prompt in, and then there's going to be seconds, there could be minutes that pass. And this is the AI thinking. And with DevSwarm, the goal is that while it's doing this, you can go continue working in other areas of your application. So for me, I'm going to go work on my invincibility system here. And then, so it's going to do some research on, I guess, the latest memes. What it's actually doing is investigating my code base to understand how I have my system is currently implemented and going to investigate a plan of attack for me. And then we can use our hotkeys to switch between the two. And so these are both running here. And so if there's another, and then it's going to ask, for feedback. And so it just asked if this is what I'd like to do. And my quick glance is like, this is exactly what I was expecting it to do. And I can continue iterating, but now I can keep going. I'm never waiting for the AI. I can just keep building on the various parts of the application as we go.
And one piece of context here, because this is a game, this is sort of doing a game. One question that comes up is like, well, what can this be used for? And this can be used for web applications, infrastructure as code for DevOps, can be used for data pipelines, anything with data, AI. DevSwarm itself was built with DevSwarm. So in terms of building Electron apps, mobile apps, all of those things can really be used in that context.
Absolutely. And a key part of this is like when it comes to really understanding some of the stuff that you're actually able to do with these command line assistants, when I'm iterating on infrastructure, for example, and that can be a challenging area to iterate on because iterating on, say, CloudFormation infrastructure with AWS or whatnot, there's frequently times where you're waiting in general, like it's deploying and stuff, right? And because of that, it's useful to be able to hand off a lot of that deployment to the AI. You provide what you need, it goes and deploys, and it can evaluate the logs and stuff like that to see what error cases are, and then you can move on to another task. So generally speaking, you can attack from all different angles here. You can attack from so if you're doing a full stack implementation, right? You're doing the front end, you're doing the back end, you're doing the database, you got to deploy the infrastructure. These are all areas that all interact in certain ways, but just as you would with an engineering team, you'd be able to, you have to delegate and understand where the interfaces are. And then once you have that, and, since you have that understanding already in your head, That means that as the engineer now, you can actually act on the full picture. I find it personally disruptive when I can only focus on one area and then I've got to wait for the other area. Now I can build all areas at once at the same time and actually continue to act on and iterate quickly when something doesn't seem to line up. I can move over to the other area and work on that. So I've added a second repo here called edict, which is my JavaScript rule library here. And I'm going to say, can we update algorithm from ready to the ready algorithm. And so the key part here that's important is that this is a whole other repository. And yet I can keep working across these different applications here. Please execute the plan. And so now, if I'm a consultant or someone that's on my own working on several different clients, I actually have the means that I can continue working on several different projects at once. Or if you're someone that's just got a lot of side projects like myself, and I've only got, say, 45 minutes in the evening to work because I've got two kids, suddenly I can actually make progress on all of my projects all at once in the evening, in a much shorter amount of time without waiting. The most disruptive thing for me is having to wait. If I've got 10 or 15 seconds between each point of implementation, that usually means I'm going to get distracted. When I'm working with DevSwarm, I actually feel like I'm finally able to move as fast as I can think. Like I don't leave flow. I just keep going, and it's amazing. The key part here that's important, that's different from some of the other products that have AI parallelism. So like Copilot, you can send up background tasks, right? And there's a few other systems that have such background tasks. And the challenge there is that you're kind of out of the loop. You put in a really good PR, a decent prompt, and then it goes and does its work. But if there's any key misunderstanding, the output's not going to be what you want, and you're not going to find out till it's already a PR. That's the value of these command line assistants, is that you are continuously in the loop at every little code change here. And if this is a code base you're pretty familiar with, it actually doesn't take much. You're just really looking to make sure that things are going the direction you were expecting when you started building this. We do have other tools that help with this, to help comprehensively, to help you manage all this. So up here we have our git commit screen. And so this is, if you're more comfortable with using a UI to commit your work and stuff like that, we expose this as a diff. I'm going to commit all this work and then we can go look at the diff view. And so if I go over here, so now this is the diff view. And actually this is the view that I think has the most potential with AI, because what we have here is that, generally speaking, my interaction, my relationship with my AI is more similar to like working with a coworker, in the sense that I'm iterating, reviewing. And then finally, when I'm ready to go ahead and start pushing this work up to my actual human team, I want to be able to see everything that I've done before I actually make the decision to put it up, right? And so here is a place where you can go through and see everything that has changed, and then from there go ahead and understand whether or not it's ready, and provide feedback to the AI when you find things that you need to go ahead and say, oh, well, I guess we misunderstood that. Let's go work through there. So that is largely the long and the short of it, is the ability to go ahead and move as quickly as you can think, because you can actually just continue working across multiple systems and multiple branches. Everything is safely isolated. And when it comes to actually running your application, the key part that is really helpful, especially in web app development and in most forms of development, there's usually some limited resources that you have on your local machine, is that you don't usually trying to run 2 or 3 different versions of your application means that there's going to be things that are fighting over ports or file paths or anything like that. So some of the features that we have to help with that is something we call port variables. And so you can add a set of names here. And so this could be the API port, for example, and the database port, and maybe the UI port. So any builder that I make after setting these up will have access to these in its environment. When a builder is spun up, we look for open ports to bind to, and we bind each of these environment variables to an open port. If you then go and make the changes in your code base to use these ports when you're set up, and a lot of frameworks come with ports already, right? So Vite, for example, just has a port variable or whatnot, right? It'll bind to it. And then when you run multiple branches of your work to evaluate it, so for code review, for example, with our coworkers, it's actually changed how we do code review at 20 Ideas. I will just pull down 3 or 4 PRs at a time. I will get them all installed and running, and I will run multiple versions of the app and evaluate each one. And because we have the port binding set up, that means that they don't fight with each other. This is and the reason, and some frameworks will go ahead and like try to figure out an open port, but they're not all set up cohesively. So they'll just choose random ports, and then your system won't be able to actually, run because nothing is able to talk to each other. This makes it so they can run. If you've got complex Docker Compose setups for running locally, this is super helpful. Another part is that to make it so that everything is nice and isolated between two different file systems, so two different AIs can't interact and cause problems with each other, we make it possible to copy configuration into each builder that isn't tracked in history. So to do that, we have this file pattern feature that lets you copy files that match certain patterns. So if you've got sensitive API keys in your .env file or your application.local.properties file that you don't want to be committed to Git history, you can put these names in here and it'll match those files. And every time you start a builder, it'll copy files that match these into the builder, but it won't be part of your Git history. Because these builders are all on your local machine as file systems, then we need to make it easy for you to get to them in case something is going wrong with the AI and you actually have to just go in and edit some stuff yourself. And so to do that, we have a feature that lets you open your default code editor. I'll go ahead and, so this is VS Code, and I trust the authors here. So this is open VS Code into the file system that has the invincibility system builder going. And so the changes it's made in here, oh, there it is. It's in this, it's now in this UI, and so I can interact with it in my editor if needed. Generally speaking, this should be happening seldom. This is one of the other key differences with working with DevSwarm and doing Hive coding versus working with, more that, well, with an IDE like VS Code. The AI is off to the side. It's a support element. It's trying to work. You are still primarily the one acting on the code. With DevSwarm, the AI is the way that you are interacting with the code primarily, and this is here as support in case you need it. Some things that the IDEs still do very well is that IDEs can still set debuggers really well so that you can step through code. Sometimes there are merge conflicts that the AI can have trouble with, and the IDEs have got a lot of power with that, and so that's still a useful feature that they have. But generally speaking, almost everything that I do right now through in terms of development is through the AI. I will ask the AI to write my commit messages. I will ask it to draft PRs for me and push them up. I will go up to GitHub and I will comment on my own PR. And then I will ask the AI to pull my PR down and read all the comments that I've left for myself and then act on those. There's a lot of power you can do with these command line tools because they have access to the command line. Are there any questions that I can answer?
And we have a frequently asked questions on our website. Some of the things about, some of the different modes and views, terminals.
Absolutely. You have access to the terminal right in the builder file system. Make as many of these as you need to. And so with this in combination with the builder, generally speaking, you can act on anything you need to do. You can run your application through here directly if you don't want the AI to be running that. And generally speaking, with these sets of tools, I haven't had to open an IDE in the last like 3 months. I've just been almost all of DevSwarm has been built with AI. And in the last couple months, once it got to that certain degree of fidelity with the features, it's been built through DevSwarm. It's not uncommon for me to have 3 or 4 versions of DevSwarm running at a time on my machine.
Yeah, one of the keys here is that diff view, because the code matters, and that's the high velocity engineering piece. The Hive coding is really, the initial post about vibe coding was all about the code doesn't matter. You can just kind of like use vibes. And this case, the code does matters to pay attention to it. And this is all about speed of creating that code in parallel, being able to do different things and let it crank and think and having some choice. So that's another piece of this, is that freedom to choose. Hey, I mean, if we only had one choice, which was Claude Code, this demo would be over. Trevor would say, sorry, everyone, Claude Code is down and, today and we're good. Or in the middle of it, it would have stopped working and we would have had to stop. But in this case, having some other choices allows us to continue to move. And we've definitely experienced that throughout the last 6 months as some of these AI development companies are still trying to figure out and change models. There's a big conversation and debate in the Reddit community about Claude Code and about them degrading their experience people saying it worked better last week, what's going on, and being not too happy about that and switching over. And so you see a lot of that portability and movement. And right here, right now, it makes it really easy to do this or even go local. So we have this working with Aider and Goose, two open source local ones that can point at local LMs. So you can bring in LM Studio and Qwen 3. You can point right to that and basically just running without any internet. Yeah, the best coding agent will continue to change. So the one that's the best as of last week won't be the best as of next week. We'll keep seeing that.
And something that's interesting is that for a lot of there are a lot of desktop apps that provide a UI in front of the terminal, but what that means is that they will either not be released until they've implemented all the features that the CLI has, or that you just won't have access to the features that the CLI has. These are generally speaking the cutting edge of AI technology when it comes to code development. And so here there's all sorts of I don't even know what Corgi mode is, right? Like these features, every single AI has got their own special sauce that makes them amazing. I've heard that code review with Amazon Q is actually quite good. Then Gemini, of course, I believe is really accessible to a lot of folks. They have a really generous free tier, for example. And then Claude Code has a lot of power with its agent mode, for example, which I don't believe is in any other AIs. And so there's a lot of power in each of these, and they all bring their own thing to the table. And also, just generally speaking, they all have different organizational requirements. So we've Amazon Q, because through Amazon, that has a lot of really strong organization management to make sure, to help manage who has access to what in their AWS account. And so certain organizations may exclusively only have access to Amazon Q. So with DevSwarm, they'd be able to work, they'd be able to do this Hive coding approach just fine because we support that.
Okay, a few questions here. How do we reconcile merge conflicts? How do we deal with merge conflicts?
So generally speaking, the merge conflicts you'll have are the same ones you'd have if you were working, with a team. And my approach is I usually initially just ask the AI to reconcile the merge conflict for me. I'll say, can you please merge origin main, for example? So the workflow of generally the flow that I experience is still the same that I've had for the last 15 years in the sense that I iterate and then I review my code and then I push it up for a PR and then my team reviews it and I don't want to waste their time. So I spend a lot of time making sure that it is ready for their review and then they review it, it gets merged in. But if I've got other builders going and stuff, I want to make sure that they're ready to go. And if there's a merge conflict, these AIs, especially Amazon Q and Claude Code and Codex and Gemini, these AI are quite powerful. And so generally speaking, you could say, please merge from origin main. And if there's conflicts, it'll start working through and asking you for anything it's confused about, and you can reconcile it really quickly. And that can work at scale. I've had several PRs at one point that I just wanted to triple check where, if I merged all of them, would they still run and be fine? I just set up another builder and I told my AI to go ahead and just grab the branches for all of them and say, please merge all these branches in and work through the merge conflicts. And it didn't just, like merge and let it break. It would ask me questions about if it wasn't certain, but generally speaking, it would make the right choice. It would say this line of code was changed due to this reason, and that makes a lot of sense. So we're going to take that over this one, and it worked really great.
Excellent. Next one, DevSwarm, can it be set up to assign GitHub issues or Jira issues to it and have it implement an issue and generate a PR? So I can answer that one. Yeah, we are working on that one as we speak. So it is definitely an excellent idea. One of the North Stars of DevSwarm is staying in DevSwarm. Like, there are a lot of times when you hop out over here and do this and hop out over there and do that. And there's less and less reason to do that for a lot of experiences. And so that North Star is keeping the experience so you can just do more in there, especially in parallel. And that's really the foundational sort of key difference from almost anything we see out there is doing it parallel from the get-go and keeping you in the loop and control. We're not throwing background tasks that we, sort of like a slot machine that we see what we get back, but we're actually, keeping those front and center in front of us. And then, so we got GitHub and Jira issues and linear, +1 on linear.
All right, nice. It's good to know. And the other thing that can, something you can do with these AIs as well, like I said, that they have access to the CLI and there's also MCP servers. And so with DevSwarm, it's also possible to just wire into those so that if your organization is using something that isn't supported, generally speaking, by DevSwarm, but it has access to a command line tool, you can use that command line tool. I sometimes administer Jira through this guy using the Atlassian MCP server, and I'll say, hey, can you go mark these stories as ready for review or something like that? And it'll go and do it, and then I'll continue working on other things. We're working to make that much more ergonomic in DevSwarm, to make it just like we have the feature to make it so it's really easy to install an AI from the get-go, so you don't have to figure all that out. We're going to make it more ergonomic for a lot of these other common workflows as well. And the engineer that has been working on the Jira integration literally did say to me, like, wait, Trev, like, do I ever need to visit Jira again? And I was like, I mean, for this part of the workflow, no, man, I think you've got it. And, you know, it was checkbox, 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 started several builders, and he just got rolling. It was amazing.
Excellent. And Dan has a question. Hi, Dan, about the cognitive overhead of task switching, sort of the concern of, wow, you have doing all these things in parallel, you know, with like no latency between. Do you ever get lost or struggle with, you know, I'm working on 5 tasks, and is that an issue?
So what my experience has been, and so where it makes a lot of sense to do this is that when there's it's about the scope of what you can accomplish at once now. And so if you're working on a feature and it's got these various parts that can be implemented in parallel, you're thinking about the whole feature. You've already got the whole feature in your head. And what had happened before, at least for me, was that I would be working on one part of the feature and I would be frustrated because I already knew the solution. I just wanted to get it all done, but I was limited by the fact that my tooling would only let me work on one thing at a time, and I had to type the whole thing myself. And so with DevStorm, what I found is that it's not the context switching is for me when I have to move to a completely different topic. Like if I'm switching to a meeting or switching to, you know, something disruptive that I wasn't expecting. But when I'm working in DevStorm, I'm working on a non-trivial feature. It actually is extremely liberating to be able to say, like, okay, cool, I'm gonna go let's get this data schema part started, and then I'm gonna go get the component library for it started over here. And I'm just going through and just making sure everything is lining up with my vision. And when that's happening, what I find is that I stay in flow better because I'm watching the whole system come to life in front of me. Whereas before, you know, like I'd implement, run tests, implement, like run a build, you know, I'd have to wait. I'd have these small micro disruptions that are just inherent in software development currently. You know, we have deployments, we have builds, we have tests, and you're stuck waiting for that to happen, right? And it's validating when everything comes back green, but you're still disrupted, right? So with DevSwarm, because all those little micro disruptions are now part of the AI's problem and not your problem, and you've got the whole system and you're moving forward on everything, you're able to stay in flow and stay focused on the actual thing that matters. The One of the key things that has been one thing that was really it's also been wonderful is that when you see that the vision that you have needs to change, you're in the flow and you can actually update all the different parts of the component at once. So if you notice that some feature didn't work, some API or service or whatever didn't like work how you expected, you can now go and stop all the other parts of the feature, all the other components of this feature, and then have them pivot as well and start moving, you know, holistically in a certain direction rather than wait to have to go back and do all that yourself.
And here's another question on here is how do you sometimes do planning versus execution? So if you're coming up with something that's maybe a little more complex, there's
Yeah.
sort of the not just saying like, hey, go build this and here's,
Oh,
but
100%.
actually say like, hey, come up with a plan. Let me think about
Yeah.
this and, you know,
So
put in a markdown file. Like what are the best ways you found to do that?
absolutely. And so something that I found is that these AI are actually really helpful when it comes to planning. You absolutely should be doing planning and research and prototyping as much as possible before you start on the real thing. And so what I have found is that when I'm first developing the designs to the scheme of the implementation for the system, I'll ask it to generate, I'll explain what I want, but and then I like to speak through pictures, not text. So I'll ask it to generate SVG files and index.html files for diagrams and for layout, so that I can see essentially what it is that I'm computing visually. And I use those low-level formats. It's actually able to do that quite well. And then when I can see the output and I can see it's lining up with my vision, that's very helpful. But one thing that I've also found is that before AI, and before DevSwarm, you know, there would be a lot of emphasis on trying to find all the little landmines that could exist, and that's very important to do. But there wasn't really the ability to really go prototype as much as I wanted to de-risk all of them, because that's just a lot of time to go and build out a bunch of code that you're going to throw away. Just inherently, it feels wasteful, even though it is very productive. But with DevSwarm, what I've found is that whenever I find an unknown, I can immediately start a builder to go make a prototype to go de-risk it. When I have an idea that I want to express, I immediately start a builder and explain what I want the prototype to do, and have it just generate a single index.html file that has the UX that I want to convey to my coworkers. And so what I found with DevSwarm is that I can start doing much more robust planning and create a lot of really solid examples that are really good for AI, because I can start prototyping all the things that are de-risking all at the same time. And then once they're all ready, I just commit them into branches and I merge them all into the original branch where I'm doing most of my design, and make that all cohesive. And then I have all these references of prototypes, and you can make it really clear to the AI, like, this is a prototype. Please go use our actual Tailwind configuration when you go to implement these components. Please use our actual service layer to do this. Don't use the fetch API that it used or whatever, right? And so, and once you can get that, once you get solid and you know that all the parts are going to work, then the initial implementation, actual implementation phase goes really reliably and really well. And you already know what can be parallelized because you're really familiar with all the different parts of the system now.
Excellent. I'm going to do a little rapid fire here. So do I need individual licenses to do different coding platforms along with your platform? Yes. Some of them have some good free tier, and we're actually going to make a note of that to sort of clear the interface. Claude Code we use its 200 max all the time, but Codex with their, I think, $30 a month, Amazon Q and Gemini with their free tier, Aider and Goose local. There are a number of different choices, and a lot of people are. What we found is a lot of people already have some type of licenses that they can use on that front. Do we hit maximum usage limits sooner because we're going in parallel? Is that something, Trevor, you want to speak to?
Yeah, absolutely. You will hit usage limits sooner. And that itself is something that'll be important in your decision of which AI system to use. So the reason that we use our $100 plan or $200 plan with Claude Code, 20 ideas, is that we, generally speaking, even if we're going full tilt, don't hit the usage limits. On a really productive day, we can hit the usage limits on the $100 plan. But Amazon Q is $20 a month, and it has unlimited. It doesn't rate limit. It just is a little bit slower. But with DevSwarm, that's less of a problem because you can do a lot. And the things that you can do, you're already doing, the moment you got two builders going at generally full speed, you're already moving twice as fast, right? And so with Amazon Q, that was a big part of DevSwarm was built with Amazon Q because of that great trade-off. But Claude Code's performance was really wonderful as well. You could also, try doing something I want to go try soon is try all the free tiers. So just Gemini and Amazon Q and any other free tiers, and just have a different AI per builder, and see how long I can stretch the free tiers that these things offer.
Excellent. Can DevSwarm be used to develop a web application? And I think it's a web design application such as Dreamweaver or so on. And I think in general, the question is, can it be used to develop various software? And any software that you see out there, it can absolutely be used. But it is sort of like, beg the question of like what goals, what is sort of your level of expertise with it? So again, one of the points is this isn't vibe coding in the sense that you sort of put the thing in and ignore the code. So it is an important piece of it is the familiarity with the code. This is really aimed at the expertise of, the engineering piece, but just making the dev team able to move that much faster. Provided download link, that I threw that into the chat. Question in terms of language, Electron and TypeScript are the core pieces. We have not started a builder to rewrite the whole thing in Rust yet, but we can do that in parallel too.
And if that question's about like what languages work best with these AI things, what I've found is they're pretty dang good at almost everything. You can, language, the syntax of language is largely going away, it feels like, and you're going to now be focusing more on the different characteristics of things that run the language. So, Rust, C, Go, you're going to be looking for those for performance, TypeScript, JavaScript, the fact that they can interop with the browser natively. Those are the interesting things that are coming out of AI in general.
And one thing that comes up for some people is, hey, if the language matters less, can I choose something that has more security built in, less risk on that front? I think that's sort of some Go and Rust, TypeScript, things with type safety, things with more safety comes up again and again. Excellent. We have Ania with your hand up.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I recently changed from vibe coding to using Visual Studio Insights. I'm curious, how would I use this in conjunction with this? And the way that I've kind of organized my Visual Studio is that I have all of these roles and the requirements in its separate like MD files, but I want to go a little bit faster. So how what's the best way for me to do that? And then do you have any one-on-one coaching available for people who are kind of new to this?
Excellent. So Visual Studio Insights. Tell us more about what Visual Studio Insights is. Is that because yeah, we use VS Code or Visual Studio. Is that sort of like the AI component? Oops. See if the unmuting. Let's get that working again.
Sorry, the unmuting keeps breaking up. Yeah, so it's basically like Visual Studio Code, but it has an AI agent in it, and some of the newest things that Microsoft is rolling out are available there earlier. What I'm looking to do is really make the code a little bit more stable and production ready. And so that's why I decided to go with those tools versus what I was using before, which was Bolt. I really like what you guys
Got it.
built, but it does feel a little bit intimidating to learn yet another tool. So I'm wondering if you have one-on-one coaching or like a quick setup that you can share, a guide that would be helpful.
Yeah. Oh,
Excellent.
our documentation. So the thing I want to emphasize that is important to call out here, and this took, like it's a shift. It's not it's not, so our documentation that we have built into the app and on the web at docs.devswarm.ai, it does kind of go over like what is it that you can do to make it so that you're ready to build in parallel, because it's not easy, it's not at hand, it's not something that's natural. And so it does take a different mindset and a different it is a skill set to develop. It's a skill set to take a step back and realize, could I be doing more? Could I be doing something? And could I be adding something else? And so our docs, they walk through the features and they walk through the different parts of DevSwarm as well. But a big part of them really is just kind of discussing what are the things that have changed, what it is that we need to consider now, what is it that we should focus on because of this kind of change in mindset. Frequently I'll have engineers that'll they'll actually, just yesterday I had an engineer, we had a couple features we were going to add to DevSwarm, and he asked me, like, so which one's the priority? And I said, well, you've got DevSwarm, like just do both. And because they were both tractable things we could do in a builder, and they were both very well to be separated and stuff like that. The thing I'll say, with one thing that, I mean, it was a design decision to ensure that we put the terminal as raw as we could into DevSwarm so that you had full access to everything that a terminal could do with these AI. But if you're using, Visual Studio Insights, it sounds to me like you've got access to an AI that's running in your code base. This actually isn't too far from that. This is ultimately just a much more technical looking interface, but it's still typing into a prompt, right? It's still communicating directly with an AI, and it's so, like, right now it's found that this machine doesn't have Java because it's my demo machine, not my game dev machine. I could just ask it to start installing Java, right? It would just be pros, and it'll show me code diffs, and and then our documentation highlights some of the other features that that for if you're if you've been doing software development for a while, this is all very natural, but yes, it will be new. But hopefully our documentation helps walk through that. And our plan absolutely is to begin making educational content on different patterns to use with DevSwarm and what all this means as well, so that it's easy to walk into this new world that we have.